All right, welcome to the another live stream here from Waiheke Media Teacher on this time on the exam question for the upcoming Year 10 exams on Hunt for the Wilderpeople by Taika Waititi. I'll try and be a little bit like it was last night. I'm not as, that was the birthday song, by the way, everyone's favourite song. Not as kind of organised tonight as it was yesterday. But we'll go through some of the questions and I'll have a bit of a corridor about how you might approach them in the test tomorrow. I think we've kind of a lot of what I talked about last night as far as to sort of describe and explain for the questions around the absolutely true diary of a part-time Indian sort of apply on this. You've essentially had some work on these questions already earlier when we did the Hunt for the Wilderpeople essay. And some of you may not have finished this. Some of you might have got at least some good notes in here, some brainstorm, some ideas around relationships, around the setting and around the idea, and in anticipation for. Let me just turn off my. There we go. In anticipation of this question, and so there was 3 questions that came up. It's pretty much similar to what's going to be on the test, and like the novel question, you've got 3 questions. Oh, I better switch over here. You got 3 questions. This is what I was talking about. The essay that we did. 3 questions, and you pick one of the questions. Now, it's important again that you answer both parts of the question, and if I just pull this up, I'll show you there's 2 parts. The first part is to describe, and the second part is to discuss, and each one has this describe, discuss, describe, and discuss. So describe an interesting relationship in the film and discuss why this relationship is interesting. Describe an important setting in the film and discuss why this setting is important. Describe an important idea in the film and discuss why this idea is important. It's important that you understand what the key words are in the question. So the first one, thanks, hello Kai and Kane. The same one for both of them. Let me just, I'll just pick this apart a little bit and then I'll answer your question. So describe an interesting relationship in the film and discuss why this relationship is interesting. So there's a couple of words in here, is like interesting and relationship. Relationship, you can't have a relationship without really talking about characters. And so this is essentially kind of a character question. You need to be able to talk about the 2 characters that you're talking about, or possibly 3 characters in the film, and discuss why it was interesting to you, what it actually contributed towards a film. Now, there's some obvious ones in this film. There's obviously, you'd sort of be a bit foolish if you weren't going to talk about Ricky Baker, right? I mean, the film essentially centers around this guy. So I would be thinking, if I was going to do this question, that's one of the characters I'd be looking at. So we could have Ricky Baker and Heck. That's an interesting relationship. And it's kind of the core of the film. I mean, these 2 people start off fairly antagonistic towards each other. They don't really like each other. Heck doesn't really sort of warm up to Ricky. But they end up kind of coming to need each other and to rely on each other for certain things. And so over the course of the film, their relationship changes. And that's probably partially something that you could be talking about, is how what's interesting about it is how it starts off one way, but through the course of the film it changes, and they become sort of friends, and they actually become family. And so I would also be talking a little bit about family in that one as well. Notice that when I kind of talk about these questions, I'm often also talking about a theme that comes up at the same time, a key idea. Okay. Oh yeah, thanks with the drawing, the drawing tool. Hey man, no holds barred around here. So then the second one is describe an important setting. Look, Kyle, I'll even change the color for you there. An important setting in the film, and discuss why the setting is important. So again, we got the describe and discuss. Yesterday, for the essay question, we had describe and explain. An important setting in the film and why the setting is important. And setting includes, for this one, we're pretty much talking about place. Not so much time, although setting often does include place and time, but the time in this one's not so relevant. It's supposed to be kind of contemporary. And there's not a lot to talk about that. But the setting that we have is quite unique. It takes place in a very dense and inhospitable part of the New Zealand bush. And that is a sort of an obstacle that these characters have to overcome in a way. You could contrast the setting as well. That's always a nice thing to do, is if you can in an essay find certain contrasts. You could contrast the fact that this setting is a place that's particularly unfamiliar and unique to Ricky Baker. He's pretty much a city kid. He's brought up in the city. He's lived his whole life in a city, and now he's kind of thrown in the country. And we see this when Taika Waititi, the director, uses that montage scene of all the bad things that Ricky's done. He's breaking stuff, stealing stuff, lighting stuff on fire. It also takes place in a very urban setting. In fact, there's a kind of what we would call a long shot, and you should use that kind of terminology in your responses if you can. A long shot of Ricky on a bridge with the city in the background, and that kind of sets, that lets us see, this is a kid in an urban environment. And so we could contrast that environment, that setting of his early life with where he is now, and that's partially why the setting is important. So I think that's probably the only really setting that I would be talking about in that question there. So then the third one is describe an important idea in the film and discuss why this idea is important. That one you're sort of thinking about themes and key ideas, like we had yesterday. You had key ideas in the novel, and this time we've talked about, they're called important ideas. The one important idea that we did talk about a little bit and did a bit of work on, that you should still have somewhere in your electronic notes, is the idea of family. And Waititi has actually talked about this as well. That family is kind of a theme that shows up in a few of his films. If you've seen the film Boy, that's a film about family. Even the kind of Into the Shadows, which is one of his films on Netflix about these vampires who live in Wellington and kind of create this sort of weird family living in this house. And then in Hunt for the Wilderpeople, you've got this idea of family being kind of a key theme. So it seems to be something that Waititi is talking about quite a bit. And I think the main thrust of family in this film is the idea that family doesn't necessarily look like a mum and a dad and two kids and a dog. It can take all kinds of forms and shapes, and in fact, over time it can change, and it's become something that actually you need around you to try and support you in your endeavors. And so and I think that this is quite a nice idea to talk about. And how do we see this in this film? Well, we kind of see it particularly at the beginning when we have family services who rocks up with Ricky, sort of hands him over to Auntie Bella, and she becomes this kind of like sort of motherly figure, this, cliched auntie type figure to Ricky. He's never experienced anything like this. And in fact, I think there's even a suggestion that he's never had a birthday before. And so when she composes the birthday song for him and he sings along, you can see he's starting to accept the idea that this is actually something I quite like. And when she's sort of very quickly taken away from him, that idea of the family kind of again is pulled out from under him, and he sort of does what he does and runs away from it all. And then when we kind of again get Heck in on the scene, when Heck goes and tries and sort of tracks Ricky down, and then hurts himself, we see another sort of a strange family or a strange bond between two people who had been previously kind of antagonistic towards each other, not particularly liking each other, start coming together. And they become, and Heck actually becomes the uncle, the sort of substitute father figure. And actually there's a point where, Heck is still quite uncomfortable with Ricky calling him uncle and says, I'd prefer to call you Heck, but he kind of ends up reverting back to uncle anyway. And so, and it turns out that these two people actually really need each other in this adventure that's going, that carries on after that. And this kind of culminates at the end of the film with Ricky kind of sort of reverting back to his older sort of nature and not doing the kind of what a family should do, kind of, when he shoots, sort of accidentally shoots Heck in the bum and kind of suggests that Heck was, the molesterer. He sort of goes back to his old ways, but it's kind of resolved at the end when they come together in one final time, and Ricky has found this other family which he then invites Heck into, and the implication is that they may all live together in this kind of out in the bush as a family, as a sort of a strange family. I mean, an older guy, a young kid who's like an orphan, and a girl and her father. So that's kind of a big, an important idea in the film, and you could definitely discuss that idea. Now, these tips here still apply to writing this essay, to talk specifically about things that happen in the film. So specifically about things can mean a couple of things. One, it can mean, as you might have just heard me do there, talk about specific events that took place, that happened in the film. So you could talk about, for example, I talked about Kyle, I'll answer your question in a little bit at the end. I talked about the birthday scene where she writes the birthday song. So that is, that's talking specifically about something that happened in the film and how that sort of contributes to this idea of family. If you can quote characters and give, that's great as well. So again, quote characters or give examples to support the points you make. I would think of that support to take two forms, and that's either a quote or actually a description of a particular scene in the film. Okay, so that's kind of about all I've got for that one. So actually, let me just pop back. I wasn't on the I wasn't on. I was talking about this, but not showing you. I was highlighting this part in here where I was talking about the tips. They talk specifically about things that happen in the film, quote characters, or give examples. So the examples are just you describing events that happen, and quotes are, a quote is if they say something specifically. So the other thing about talking about film is that it's nice if you can also talk about some of the techniques of that are unique to film, and there's a couple that sort of stand out for me in this film. One is a film technique that Taika Waititi has used before, which is this idea of montage, which is like quick snippets of scenes sort of jammed together quite quickly to give you a lot of information in a short period of time. So the part where we're trying to find out a little bit about Ricky's background. We want to know where he's come from, and the woman, what's her name, from the child services, she's describing all these things that Ricky's supposedly done, and that's sort of supported by this montage of these quick cuts of scenes where we see Ricky doing, sort of naughty things. So that's a technique, montage. Another technique that we see in this film that could be relevant to particularly this one here, the question about the setting, is aerial footage. Okay, so that's a kind of, we would also sort of, sometimes we would think of that as like a bird's eye view, but it's not really a bird's eye view. In this sense, it's actually kind of drone footage or footage that's shot from a helicopter. And the reason why that's important for this question here, and it could be a technique which you would actually talk about, you're kind of like name dropping these things is what you want to do, is that it really helps us establish a sense of the setting of the film, like how huge the bush is, like how dense it is, and how far they've actually got to go in these distances that they're traveling. And that's achieved by these by this use of aerial footage. There's also some other techniques which are not necessarily sort of camera techniques, but that you could talk about in relation to this film if you're taking some notes on techniques, are humor. The film's funny, and that humor, if it wasn't for that humor, it might be quite a sort of depressing story about like a fat orphan who's thrown off into the bush with these kind of two weird old people and is chased after by child protection services. On one hand, it's kind of like a pretty serious and, dark story, but it's through the use of these characters that are funny and humor that Taika Waititi manages to kind of make it into an easier to digest story that's not so serious and not all sort of gloomy and dark. And so humor is something that is used by the director. The director is using it to help develop this film and to make us want to identify with these people and watch till the end. Also, contrast. That's another technique that we can think of. And what's been contrasted here is you've got sort of Ricky's life in the city versus Ricky's life out in the country. You've got in the relationship, if you were talking about the relationship, you could be talking about the contrast between the character of Ricky Baker and Heck. They come from wildly different kind of backgrounds. One's old, one's young, one's used to like living his own on the bush, and the other one's used to like being in the city and and being a kind of an orphan. So there's lots of kind of contrasts which are going on in the film which you could talk about. So those are a couple of techniques that I just wanted to mention, that if you can sort of get those into your essay, that would be good too. So contrast, the use of humor, montage, aerial footage, which does the establishing, which helps for the establishing shots for the vastness of the wilderness. There's also other things like there's a little bit of, it's not special effects, but it's kind of what would you call them? I suppose it is kind of special effects in a way, where he kind of hallucinates seeing things as food, like he sees the chicken, and he sees he's starting to kind of hallucinate. But anyway, I'd probably just list those four: contrast, humor, montage, and aerial footage might be things that you could slip into here in any one of these questions. These are very relatable characters to us, and I think that's what makes it a successful film, is we can relate to the characters. So I think that's about it. There's a couple of questions on here. How long would be a suitable time to spend on each of these essays so that I don't spend an hour on one? Yeah, well, on the I've actually I've got the exam, or essentially an older exam, here in front of me, and I think if you look at, I'll just switch back one more time. If you look on This document, where are you? Oh, I've disappeared, haven't you? Damn, I had you somewhere. I can go to Google Classroom, Year 10. I think a lot of this is laid out on this revision guide as well. I'm pretty sure that's got the time frames. Yeah, okay. So let's just go over this one more time, and then we'll wrap this up for you. So it suggests you've got 2 hours for the exam. And it suggests that you spend 30 minutes on the essay. So the essays are, if I remember correctly, around 350 words. So I'd be looking at sort of like 4 paragraphs type thing. So I'd spend a bit of time. With 30 minutes, I would spend 5 to 10 minutes doing a bit of a plan and sort of just loosely sketching a bit of an outline on what I'm going to talk about. So I would rewrite the and you should be able to get paper for this in the exam. You should have extra paper, so use a piece of paper or use the back of the exam somewhere, and just write down what question you're going to answer, and then start sort of doing a little bit of brainstorming about each of the your paragraphs. So, and actually, you've essentially, you've got a lot of the stuff already here, so you kind of should be fairly prepared when you come in to kind of like just spit out an essay. So I would be spending sort of 5 to 10 minutes writing a bit of a plan, sort of just sort of focusing your thoughts, making some notes about it. If you have any quotes, write those quotes down so that they're just sort of there. Make some little notes on what little parts of the film you might be talking about to support your points and how you might structure it. So you've got an introduction. It's really how you're going to structure these couple of body paragraphs. So I think 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes doing a bit of planning, and then another 20 minutes actually writing the essay should be fine. You don't have to do it in the order that it appears in the exam too. I mean, if you would prefer to try and knock these essays out at the beginning, then do section B and section C straight away, and then come back to section A and section D. They are multiple choice, so the thing is, I suppose it could be a strategy of yours that if you knock out the essay, on the True Diary of the Part-Time Indian, then you knock out the essay on Hunt for the Wilderpeople. If you're feeling a bit pressured, you can kind of knock through the multiple choice a bit quicker. So that should that's one strategy that I think you could do. I can show you that. Is there a sheet on Google Classroom? There is a sheet on Google Classroom called Exam Year 10 End of Exam Revision. It is, if you can see right here, this is what it is. It's about 3 down now on, it's the third. It's about 3 down on Google Classroom. So there it is there. Yeah, study guide for the upcoming Year 10 exam. So open that up. I'll just go over it a little bit more, what's on there for you. We didn't really do a lot of talk about the Shakespeare part of it, but there are, look, I'll give you the tip, is that one is that there's a kind of a plot, knowing the plot of The Tempest. There's 2 things on Google Classroom that are essentially revisions for the plot, and it's just kind of like a fill in the blank type thing. The second part of the Shakespeare Tempest thing is that and that's on if there's a link in this study guide to that as well. Past work on the Tempest character, close reading of Act 2, Scene 2. I'll see if I can pull that up. Close reading of Act 2, Scene 2. Act 2, Scene 2, Stefano, Trinculo, and Caliban. Open the sheet below and research the words and phrases that highlight. Okay, so that's the one there. If you go to that one, the words that are highlighted, and you should have done this in class. We did this one day in class, so there's a bunch of highlighted words here. Those are the ones that are pretty much, you show up on the test, okay? So there's, but you lie like dogs and yet say nothing either. So and it's going to ask you what kind of a language feature is that, right? But you lie like dogs and yet say nothing neither. So if you see something like you lie like dogs, it's a simile. So that part on Shakespeare is so yeah, like I said, there's a plot summary, then there's that that speech, and just read through the speech, like take a bit of time, just go once through the speech, and then the speech also has line numbers in it, and those line numbers are also referenced in the actual questions. So it'll say something like, what's the name of the language feature Shakespeare uses in line 8? And so it'll either say it says it in the thing, or you might have to go back and look at it and say, oh, that's this kind of language feature. If you're looking for help on the language features, on the not that one there. Oh, I've gone back. On the revision guide, there languages. There's 8 parts of speech on Quizlet, and there's also language features on Quizlet. There's also poetic devices on YouTube. So there's a couple of ways you can sort of get a quick study of the language features if you need to. So let me see if there's any more questions on here. Otherwise, I'm going to go. Is there any way we could read the script or whatever for the Tempest? Eric, pretty much you don't need to read the whole Tempest again. Just read, you need to, I'd have a look at this one, the Tempest Act 2, Scene 2. That's on Google Classroom. There's a link to that one there. So you need to know that. And for the plot summary thing, there's a couple of things on Google Classroom that are, well, there's one I just put up there on plot summary the other day, and there's another plot summary. There's a couple of plot summary things on Google Classroom, so you don't really need to go read the thing, again. I just focus on that. Have a look at that one thing that I just talked about, the Tempest Act 2, Scene 2, and all these highlighted words. Those highlighted words are key, to catching this thing. And also the plot summary. There's 2 things. There's a couple of things on Google Classroom on plot summary. I just put one up actually. If you go to the stream, there's a plot quiz for revision there, and then there's something. I just put up another one by one of the other teachers, didn't I? Oh yeah, here we go. 2018 plot summary for. Okay, so there's a couple of things there. There's that Google quiz. That's a plot summary sort of quiz. And then there's actually this document here, which is a similar thing, a plot summary. So those are the 2 things you need to know. I'd have a look at those 2 things on Google Classroom, and that one speech. You're done. Don't worry about sort of getting. What do you want me to show us? The screen. Oh, sorry. I know I keep doing that. Bad live streamer. Here we go. Let me just zoom that in a bit. Yeah, okay, so there we go. There's this is the one here. It's also on Google Classroom. It's the one, 2 down. Tempest plot quiz for revision. So there's this Google quiz thing here. That's a quiz, and that's pretty similar to the how the thing appears on the exam. So you could do that, and then also there's this one here, which is just a document. They're kind of similar. And that's a plot summary of the Tempest, and with some fill in the blanks, and that's kind of what appears on the exam. So have a look at those 2 things, and then, like I said before, if you go to classwork up here, I think yours is the same. There is a section under the Shakespeare with the speech that you need to have a look at. and it's got the highlighted words, and those are the kind of things to focus on. So there's two things, the speech and the plot summary for The Tempest, and you're done. Okay, anything else? Shut up, Eric, you bogan. That's not true. You can, this thing will appear if you miss the first part. If you miss the first part, the stream will appear sort of about 5 or 10 minutes later on my channel under past live streams, and you can kind of go back on that. Let me see, how long have I been talking? I better have a look now. Probably too long, eh? 30 minutes. That's about all we can handle, really. Again, check that revision document. Plugging my merch. Why do you upload Roblox? What mic am I using? I'm just using I think I'm using a Shure SM10 actually. And I'm using OBS live streaming software. And I've got a little mixing desk, and I'm all running this whole thing on Ubuntu Linux. So there you go. That's the setup. Anyway, I won't. I don't know if I'm going to see you guys tomorrow, because I might be supervising another exam for Miss Peterson rather than you guys one. But I'll catch you in the morning, I suppose. And don't. The exams start at 9 o'clock. Thanks for telling us to revise on the revise. I've been telling you guys to revise for a long time, so guy. That thing's been up for a week, man, a week and a half. That's not true. We did watch a couple of Peppy Haas. You guys will be sweet. Don't worry about it. Don't stress too much about this. Partially, I think you just got to know your stuff, and then use kind of the pressure of the exam when you get in there to drive you forward. Don't panic. I mean, it's not the end of your it's not the end of your world if you these things. You just got to do them. Anyway, that's going to be enough for me, and I feel sick. I might not. Don't get sick. You guys just relax. It's just the thing that school's got to do. You'll be fine. Anyway, that's going to be it for me. I'm going to go and do something else besides live streaming to you. Once again, good luck on the exams. Kia kaha.